to you all, and I'm here representing the book club, and I've been delegated to do that in official capacity by our president. So with that, welcome. The timetable this evening is, first of all, the Arts Council has a program, and that will carry on until it ends. And then after that, the book club members will reassemble, and carry on with our book club discussion of Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Thien, which last year won a number of literary prizes and has received quite a range of reactions, especially from our book club members. So we'll take that. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Reg Windsor, who's the Executive Director of the Newfoundland Labrador Arts Council, and who will be the guide through your part of the program. Reg, welcome.
Thanks for that kind introduction, though. Delighted to be here, and delighted actually that yourself and the book club actually have agreed to host the event again this year. I was saying to Josh this year, just trying to remember how many years it's been. It's 7 years now, so it's a great little venue, and thank you so much actually for hosting the event again this year. And as I said, over the past 7 years. I just want to touch or talk a little bit about actually the Lawrence Jackson Award. I'm going to be introducing Willow now in a second, but my relationship with Lawrence goes back many, many years, actually about 25, 26 years ago when I started at council as a summer student. And then I got hired on, and he was actually a council member at the time. So I had the privilege actually of knowing him in that capacity, and we had quite a great board at the time. Actually, some interesting characters is how I'll describe it. Larry actually was one, we always call him Larry. Tom Kell was the chair of council at the time too as well, actually. So it was my first introduction to the Arts Council, and a very interesting one, to put it that way. Shortly after that, of course, Lawrence passed away. And after that, the family approached us about setting up some award or managing an award. So through some discussions, we agreed actually that council would undertake to manage the program in a way that was fairly easily done, cost effective, and not time consuming for a small council, of course. So what we agreed to do was to set it up as the Lawrence Jackson Writers Award. And every applicant that applied to our professional project grant program in the writing category was eligible for the award. So then our peer assessors at each grant session would actually, in the first grant session, we have 2 each year, one in the spring, one in the fall. So in the spring, they would go through all of the applications and then determine the finalists from that category or for that session. And then the fall session, the peer assessors would do the same thing. And then at that point, they had 2 finalists, and then they would discuss who the winner was. So that's how we've managed it, and proud to say that we've been doing this now for 17 years. So the relationship goes back quite a long way. So without further ado, actually, I'd like to call upon Willow Jackson, Lawrence's daughter, to elaborate a bit more on the family involvement, of course, with the award, and to announce this year's winner. Willow.
I'm very pleased to be here today. Every year, about 2 days before the award, Mom texts me, recently be texting, Willow, why don't you present this year? Oh, no. Well, this year she's a very good reason. She's in Nova Scotia. I couldn't say no, and I'm very pleased to be here. I think I'll just start, if you don't mind, I'll start with the announcement of the lucky recipient, and then I'll speak a little bit more to his experience and to some interesting sort of commonalities between the recipient and my father. So the winner of this year's award is Nathan Elliott, and I'll just read a little bit from the backgrounder because I think it has a really great overview of who he is and his experience. Nathan Elliott grew up in a logging and paper mill town in the panhandle of Idaho. convinced that life must be more interesting outside of the Idaho mountains, he went to the Chicago area to be educated and spent most of his time there, missing the Rockies. He earned a PhD in Victorian literature at the University of Notre Dame, and then he took a fellowship to work in the Deep South as an English professor. He was asked a question at an academic conference by a red-headed Newfoundlander, and they fell in love, and he later followed her to Canada. Nathan currently teaches English literature at Grenfell on the West Coast, and he's published scholarly work on the playwright Joanna, is it Bailey? Bailey, sorry. And the novelist Charlotte Bronte, as well as many others. He recently started experimenting with the genre of creative nonfiction, and he's currently working on a book about his immigration experience, tentatively entitled How to Become My Favorite Color. Sorry, How Red Became My Favorite Color. The U's are in parentheses, which I just love. And in terms of sort of a more personal perspective on this, as I read this backgrounder and thought about father and about our recipient this year, a couple of things just jumped out at me, I'm happy to say, and so I put a few ideas to paper. My father grew up in the foothills of the Rockies in a little town called Pincher Creek, which sits, again, right at the base of the Rockies near Lethbridge, Alberta, in southwestern Alberta. And he spent his summers in Waterton Lakes National Park, or as Nathan may know it, Glacier National Park, essentially. It's an international peace park that crosses both Montana and Alberta. And several times I visited family growing up in Alberta, and when traveling on the TCH, it really struck me on the west that you see a million exits for, relative speaking, many exits for Washington State, many exits for Montana, one for Idaho, and it always got me. How could a whole state only have one exit? This is before I realized there was a panhandle, which turns out to be where Nathan grew up. And not only did you grow up, it turns out, probably just hours from where my father grew up, but you also share a couple of things, other things in common. You both love literature, enjoy writing creative nonfiction. You have both missed your Rockies when living elsewhere, and my dad did till his final days. But despite missing your Rockies, you both followed your heart to Atlantic Canada and a young lassie therein. So Nathan, on behalf of the Jackson family, both East and West, I'd like to congratulate you and present you with the award.
Thank you, sincerely, actually, Willow. I do know that exit. My parents took me back and forth across that exit many, many times as a young boy, going to British Columbia and Alberta. And my parents still bounce up and across that border when they are in the States. They've proceeded to bounce all over the world at this point, so it's hard to keep track of them. I wanted to thank the Arts Council itself for all the important work it does. In the 5 years that I've been on the island, I can point to several instances in which the council has already made my life more interesting and enriched life, actually, since I came here. So thank you to them, and thank you to the Lawrence Jackson family. When I found out I got the award, I proceeded to try and find out something about your father, Willow. And I was pleased to find out that I'd already been reading a children's book, Castles in the Sea, to my young boy, many times, actually. So there was already that point of connection. I think I'd already seen in the bio that he'd grown up in the Rockies. So it actually feels very special to get the award in that particular way. I wanted to thank my wife, actually, as well. She did drive over the island to be here tonight. As I think was noted, she is a poet, and she got a call on the drive-in that she had been shortlisted for a poetry prize, her latest book. And so I said she should probably go to that event as well. But all the same, since I met her, she has defended a PhD of her own. She has given birth to my son. She has written 3 books of poetry. And she's managed to help me find my voice as a creative writer as well. So I still feel like I should say that for the record, if nothing else. Without any further ado, I think at this point I'll just go ahead and read a short selection. This is a piece that has been published, and actually I will give one more thank you, actually, since I see that I am being filmed. This short piece that I'm about to read was first published by the Tahoma Literary Review about a year ago, which is a small literary press, or literary journal actually, that's been started out in the last couple of years, out in the Seattle-Tacoma area, actually Pacific Northwest. They did a beautiful job putting it together. And they nominated for a Pushcart Prize, actually, this past winter as well. So their support this past year has meant quite a bit to me as well. Without any ado, I'll go ahead and read. This is Sheba Buys a House. Well, I should actually keep saying I'm going to read it and pausing and not doing it. I'll say a few words about what this piece is about. My wife and I, after we've been up here for about a year and a half, we decided it would be a good idea to buy a Newfoundland heritage home in the outport community of St. George's, Newfoundland, on the west coast. And we moved in there, and it's a beautiful old home. The woman who had it before us had to depart from that house rather quickly, and her things were still in there when we bought the house. And so we had to contend with her stuff, and which felt like contending with her. So the name of the piece is Sheba Buys a House. When we bought the house, we bought someone else's life. No doubt this happens all the time. Houses take on, subtly and inexorably, the personalities of their inhabitants. Rooms are remodeled around the habits of those who inhabit them. Kitchens flourish from the seasoning of frequent use, or they fall into brittle disrepair, neglected by people who live on takeout. Bedrooms are changed into offices by childless couples. Offices are converted back into nurseries by couples shocked by their fertility. Bathrooms carry the pleasurable scars of 1,000 Sunday afternoons spent smoking cigarettes and reading novels in lukewarm, soapy water. Toilet seats respond to the weight they are asked to bear. But usually when new occupants move in, the house is empty, and these ghosts only lurk in the corner of the eye. Such ghosts take their time revealing themselves. New inhabitants may not even recognize the specters they grapple with every time they toast a piece of bread. When we moved into our house, her panties were still in the bathtub. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her golf club sat in the corner, and the shrink wrap she had put up against January drafts still clung to the windows. We bought the house because we liked the tree up front. We liked the idea of having an old Newfoundland house. We liked some of the old furniture in the books, and because the odd situation allowed us to negotiate the price. We were too naive to demand that much of the detritus of her life be carted away before we took possession. The tenses get strange when her pluperfect past meets our past perfect. One day in December of 2011, 2 months after my son was born, an hour up the road, she had decided that she had had enough and moved into a retirement home on the other side of the island. We knew because the calendar still hung on the wall in her sewing room when we took possession in November of 2012. Whatever the tense, one verb was perfectly clear. Our house remained hers. On the third night that we spent in her house, my 14-month-old son burrowed into a dining room packed tight with her brittle antiques. My wife panicked. She couldn't see her son. She could only hear his giggles as he made his way through the room like a prairie dog with the detritus of other lives over his head. We heard him slam into something. He emerged from the mess wailing, with blood flowing from both lips. Moments later, he ripped 2 buttons off an ancient chair in a fit of destructive rage. We joined battle with our invisible roommate. I ripped up carpet laid down half a century ago, and dust and ash swirled around my head. We purged, we repainted, we donated old clothes reeking of mothballs and an old-fashioned perfume. We cleaned, we burned beeswax candles against her lingering odor. We cleaned again. One spring night, I ripped out the ancient carpet runner on the staircase, and the smell started to fade. We fretted when our toddler found yet more expired prescription drugs still rolling around on the floor, and we cleaned yet again. We hauled broken down furniture to the dump. We stripped ancient wallpaper off the walls, peeling back layer after sagging layer. We had begun our exorcism with compassion for the spirit we struggled against. We read her journals. We discovered the paperwork for her timeshare in Portugal. We found multiple passports, including one issued by Britain, dating back to the time before American man left the doddering empire and joined the adolescent Canadian Confederation. She was gay. The obsessive, debt-inducing plot globetrotting was a way for her to be with the woman she needed, away from prying local lives. The impressive booze collection she left behind supported the driving while intoxicated citation she was protesting in a drafted letter addressed to the local constabulary, but never mailed. One day our empathy threatened to destroy us. Instead, we burned the journals and letters and hoped flames would erase the accidental intimacy. We were throwing someone else's life away. My son sat in judgment in the back of the car as I took a warm corpse, a pinky fingernail at a time, to a muddy landfill where scruffy gulls and scruffier bald eagles screamed and picked at offal. We destroyed again and again. We became numb. We awoke one morning transformed. We were a trinity of sheep. We came to destroy. We came to transform. We came to renew. We were bloodthirsty gods of an ancient order. Even my son's infant face had been splattered with the gore he demanded from the house as his due. Now himself a divine spirit, he sported with her collection of small Buddha statues, transforming them at a whim into monsters, aliens, and toy soldiers. We peeled back the onion skin of her house to discover another layer of dust and ghosts underneath, and the stories grew up around us, along with the potatoes planted in the garden I sliced out of the back lawn. We unearthed the original inhabitants, the man who had built the house with his brother beginning in 1904 and ending in 1909. They had come from the little sandbar island community in Bay St. George to the new village beginning to grow on the shore. They built a solid merchant's house. Bootleg wine had once been stored in the kitchen cellar, so I was told, by an eccentric headed down to the beach to try and salvage lumber from a decaying fishing shed. A year later, having the kitchen floors redone, the cellar was revealed. The builder of the house had never married, said the locals, but he kept a live-in maid, a euphemism delivered with a customary wink and chuckle. We wondered about the window we found on the exterior of the back house that we could not place from the interior of the house, and we wonder still. We ordered the ancient shed out in the back destroyed and barely blinked when the long, far too durable antique nails finally gave way to our youthful demands for utility. During these years of destruction and guilty voyeurism, my son grew. Her room, where once she had waged senile war against mortality by filling it with hoarded liters of diet soda and innumerable bottles of partially used cosmetics, became his. Books with bright dragons and dark werewolves on their covers, toy boats, a brightly colored quilt on the wall, fish, moon and stars dangling from the ceiling, a rocket-shaped lamp, they all grounded the room firmly in his relentless boyhood. Her pluperfect past yielded as much as the past ever does to the urgent demands of the indicative present, and the house began to become ours. Now my son's toy dinosaurs ravage across the floors where those ancient feet once trod. The dinosaurs scream in rage for the past blood and flesh incarnations of themselves, wondering how they stumbled into this new geological age and are now nothing more than a memory, barely rendered in cheap plastic and rubber. They wonder how it is that they have surrendered their now to ours. I believe I'm supposed to offer myself up for questions.
See, there's
Did I see a hand go up in the back? Or? No.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Creative nonfiction.
Yeah, sure.
In past year or two, we read the book club read and discussed The Aviator's Wife, Anne Morrow Lindbergh.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Yes, that's all right. And that would be described as biographical fiction.
Sure.
So, can you elaborate on
is there a strict genre distinction? There might be somebody who can throw up that genre distinction better than I can. I can only say in what I've been gradually stumbling into, and I actually named this for myself a couple weeks ago when I was submitting another piece of work, is that I've almost started to write a kind of magic realist creative nonfiction where you take your life and it's what happened. Everything that I just wrote happened. That was our life for a couple of years. But in my case, it kind of takes on a weirdly mythical or a fairy tale kind of quality to it sometimes. But not all the time. This is also, I mean, just to comment on your question rather than answer it, this is becoming kind of the mode of the age right now. A lot. I haven't read the piece that you're talking about, but I spent the last couple of years reading Carl Nausgaard's My Struggle, 5 volumes, in which he takes his own life and turns it into, crafts it into a novel. And it's really difficult to say, is that a novel or is that, it's not biography. When you read it, he has shaped this into something. And that's what I'm trying to do, but not even consciously. It's just kind of what's been going on anytime I try to talk about my own life. I realize it's probably not a very satisfying answer to your question, but I do see a lot of writers struggling to do something with what actually happened while still using all the techniques of fiction storytelling. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments?
What was the name of the, I guess it's a nonfiction, you said 5 volumes?
Oh,
right?
yes, it's, he's got various titles in English, but the name of the struggle, the name of the thing overall is My Struggle. It's 6 volumes altogether, but I think the last volume is still being translated from Norwegian.
Oh, okay.
The first volume, for instance, is, I may have actually been unconsciously thinking about his first volume where he talks about cleaning up after the death of his alcoholic father and what that did to the house, the latter days of his father's alcoholism, how that destroyed the house, essentially. Kind of giving away the book a bit, but...
And what's that genre called? Is that called memoir? Or?
I think that's what actually, I mean, that's the question that's being
Yeah.
asked, honestly.
Yeah,
It doesn't read like many memoir I have read, and he's not the only one doing that. I see Joan Didion, she was doing stuff like this. Hunter S. Thompson, kind of the gonzo journalists in the 60s and 70s, were probably the first ones to start playing with something like this, where you become a character in your own life, essentially. And that is different, has kind of a different feel when you're reading it than strict memoir or autobiography. But the line is obviously really fuzzy.
Are there points where you say to yourself, no, I can't.
I can't
be
talk
that
about
creative.
It can't be that creative. About the facts, you mean? Or? Yeah, that's a good question. You have to free yourself up. I think that's actually where the Shiva metaphor kind of helped me through some sections in this particular piece. Rather than me trying to remember what exactly happened on April 10th of 2013, it became kind of compressed into a whole series of actions. My son got just used to going to the dump, I think, every other day. He thought that's what you did, you know, if you had a few spare hours or something like that. So that becomes a compressed couple of sentences. I remember looking, at least on one of those trips, looking back, and he just had this look on his face like he was completely disgusted with me, and that wanders in my head and becomes something. But it frees you up. Trying to remember every single thing that happened and then worrying about getting that exactly right. You know, there are some creative nonfiction writers. In fact, one of the more prominent literary magazines in the States, Creative Nonfiction is actually their name. They actually will fact-check your pieces. I did publish one of my first pieces with them. They were actually checking the weather at one point, the day that my son was born, because I had said something about snow. And I said, well, it doesn't look like there's any snow in Corner Brook. on that day. I was like, well, it was on, the snow was on the drive up. And I went to talk to my wife. She said, there was no snow, you jerk. Like, I don't remember anything about that. You were pregnant. You don't remember anything. And you get into these, long debates, and I end up ripping that line out of there, even though I know in my heart there was snow on those red bogs. But I don't actually particularly like that conversation in a way, because I want to be freed up to write the story. The facts are where you start. At the same time, I don't want to lie either. At least the interesting thing about the book I'm trying to write is that it happened. This is a true story. So that does imbue it with a certain compelling nature as well. One interesting thing, I've been trying to write some fiction lately too, and I feel like I kind of turned a corner, to give you a very long answer to this question. Something my fiction took on a new quality when I started writing it like it was nonfiction. Something jumped off the page, and I started acting like it was really true or something, which I don't know why I didn't kind of figure that out before, but that was an interesting mode. And of course, when you're writing fiction, a lot of times you're writing things that all happened to you. You just are freeing yourself up from the fact. And I think that's pretty much, one of the most interesting things, not to go on a bit, but one of the most interesting things I found out about Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the famous magic realist, was that he was a journalist before he began writing these very fabulous stories where all this crazy stuff would happen. But he would talk about it as if it had happened in a newspaper. And that gives it this fascinating urgency. There's even a line between fiction and nonfiction, I find actually. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.